So let's talk about Brene Brown and her #1 success secret. Her #1 success secret is to be open and to be vulnerable. Now, even saying that might sound a bit strange to some people, like why on earth would you want to be vulnerable? Well, when you're vulnerable, what you're doing is you're showing the world who you really are. And let's just be really honest here. We live in a world right now where I think a lot of people are actually scared to show their true self to the world. They armor up. This is what Brene Brown talks about. And the work that she has done, she's a professor, she's a researcher, she's written some amazing books. In fact, one of her books, Braving the Wilderness, was hugely inspirational to me. She gave me a completely different perspective of human beings. And I'm fascinated with people and why people do what they do and how people feel about where they are right now. And when I was coached, I had a coach for 16 years of my life. That was one of the questions he used to ask me. He used to ask me, how do you feel about where you are right now? And when you ask yourself that question, you have to address where you are. You have to look inside and see what's going on. Now, for a lot of people, they don't want to do that. There were some studies done many years ago that showed that people would prefer an electric shock rather than spending time on their own. Yet ultimately, we're always alone. And unless we learn to be comfortable in the space that we're in, I think we're always going to struggle. So to be vulnerable is to put up your hands and to say, you know what, I'm not perfect. I have things in my life that maybe have been difficult and challenging to me. I've experienced trauma, I've experienced heartache, I've experienced setbacks, misery, failure. I think that's one of the things we've all got in common because life isn't particularly easy. In fact, I think life is actually quite challenging. But ultimately, if there's somewhere you want to go, if there's something you want to do, if there's a place that you want to advance to, one of the things that we say a lot on the YouTube videos that we make is that what got you here is not going to get you there. So to step into a different arena, this is what Brene Brown talks about. If you want to step into the arena of evolving, of developing, of taking an idea and bringing it into the world, you're going to have to take a risk. You're going to have to be vulnerable because it just might not work out the way that you want to. Look, we as human beings are hardwired for connection. And if we think about what's happened to the world, well, it has changed. And I think a lot of people don't actually feel particularly comfortable with where they are. I also think that a lot of people are living a future that they don't want. There's a yearning to become more. There's a yearning to give their greatest gifts to the world. Brene Brown talks a lot about how we have evolved to be connected. We are hardwired for connections, but we connect into groups and ideas where we might be thinking that we're right and other people are wrong, and we end up hating people and thinking that we are better than others. It's really fascinating because what's happened to the world, we've kind of got into these ideological bunkers of this is me, but is it really you? Are you happy with where you are? I think what we have is a world that is very disconnected. We have the opportunity to connect in ways that we've never had before, but there is a pandemic in the world of loneliness, of people feeling disconnected. And to be open is to be vulnerable. And to be vulnerable, I would say, is actually to be very courageous, to be very brave, to put up your hand and say, you know what, I'm struggling right here, right now. It's fascinating because a lot of people struggle to even ask for directions, to admit, you know what, I need help. And human beings, we're really only as good as the people who actually support us. And in the work that I do, I love to help people realize, look, you are more than everything you've experienced in your life. To actually help some people get to a point maybe where they could look back in their life and say, you know what, that happened for me. It didn't happen to me. And I want to use what's happened to me, or for me, I should say, to inspire others, to go into a place, to step into the arena of the unknown. Because the way I look at this, and I'd love to hear what you have to say, because I'm not here to tell you that I'm right and you're wrong. This is just the way I see it. Having spent over 30 years working with people from all walks of life, seeing how uncomfortable people are, thinking that there's something wrong with them. And it's not that there's something wrong with us, it's the world that we've been trying to fit into. I said this to a group of young people I was working with recently. You think that the problem is you. The problem isn't you. The problem is this world that is basically giving you the message that you are not enough. And you have to do this and you have to do that. You have to be this type of person. You have to achieve this. You have to have this amount of followers on Instagram. You have to be someone who you're not. And that's where I think we've got it all wrong. I think we have to be who we choose to become. And most people are just choosing to be who they are today, not feeling quite right and wondering why history keeps repeating itself. Brene Brown talks extensively about being open and vulnerable, but she also talks a lot about being curious. Just being curious about this whole thing. Not taking any of it too seriously, because if you take it seriously, it can really bring you down. And it's time for us to lighten up and to see the greatness that resides in all of us. We say this, a great life, it doesn't happen by chance, it happens by design. And to be curious, as if you're starting to observe yourself, seeing how you're moving through the world, seeing some of the habits that you have that perhaps don't serve you, or some of the habits that do serve you, and ultimately seeing that you have a choice. This is what Jim Rohn used to speak about. He said, look, we're the only animals on earth that have this real dignity of choice. Most people are choosing to do what they've always done and they keep getting the same results, rather than choosing to brave the wilderness, which is another plug for one of Brene Brown's great books, to brave the place that you've not been before. There's a story of King Arthur who told all of his knights to go to the forest and find a part of the forest where no one had walked before, to walk your own path. But to walk your own path, it means, well, you might get lost. You might get scratched. It might not work out, but ultimately it's your path. I talked about this in a previous video about Matthew McConaughey's secret of success. And what he talks about is, who are you feeding? Who are you feeding in your head? Are you feeding the part of you that wants you to stay where you are? Or are you feeding the part of you that wants you to evolve and advance? He also says that you should never enter into anything knowing that you could win. You should go into everything knowing that you could win and you could lose, but that's where the challenge is, stepping into the arena of just not knowing, but seeing what could happen. So what could happen if you decided to brave the greatness within you? What would happen if you chose to be more open and honest about where you are and decide to move on from anything that's happened to you in your life, to realize that you're more than everything that's happened? I would say you are who you are choosing to become. I want to thank Brene Brown for the work that she has done, because she's woken up a lot of people all over the world to look at themselves differently. For people to be able to say, you know what, it's okay to be vulnerable. I don't need to put on a front like I've got this really strong front, but I've actually got a really weak back, rather than I've got a soft front. I'm open to learn, I'm open to evolve, but I've got a strong back because I know who I am and I know what my life is all about. Thank you, Brene Brown. If you haven't watched the video with Matthew McConaughey, you'll see a link to watch that right here, right now, as we go from where we are to where we want to be. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.